What if the person who once saved your life suddenly became the one who needed saving? Nathan Cole was a name everyone knew. He was one of the richest, most powerful men in the world, a billionaire with a global empire in technology and real estate. But he wasn't born to wealth. Just years ago, he had been a struggling college student, barely scraping by, unsure if he could even afford to stay in school. Nathan's life had changed because of one person, Madeline Hayes. She was the smartest student in his class, always confident, always ahead of the game. But more than that, she had been kind. When Nathan was at his lowest, Madeline had been the one to lift him up. She had helped him when no one else would, giving him the push he needed to chase his dreams. Now, after all these years, Nathan was back in Fort Lauderdale, the city where it all began. He hadn't been here in a long time, and returning filled him with mixed emotions. This trip wasn't for nostalgia. It was strictly business. He had an important meeting with major investors that could shape the future of his company. Yet, as he drove through the familiar streets, old memories resurfaced. Fort Lauderdale wasn't just another city to him. It was a reminder of his past struggles. It was where he had fought to make something of himself. It was where he had met Madeline. His flight landed late in the evening, and exhaustion weighed on him. Instead of checking into one of his usual luxury penthouses, Nathan did something unusual. He booked a modest hotel near the business district. He wasn't here for comfort. He was here to remind himself of where he had come from. The hotel was simple but clean. The front desk clerk greeted him warmly, something he wasn't used to in his high-profile world. It was a small change, but one that made him feel human again. As Nathan settled into his room, his mind wandered to Madeline. He hadn't seen or spoken to her in years. Life had taken him in a completely different direction. He had been so focused on building his empire that he had never stopped to look back. But now, sitting alone in a quiet hotel room, he couldn't help but wonder, where was she? What had happened to the woman who had once believed in him more than he had believed in himself? Little did he know, he was about to find out. And what he would discover would change everything. Next morning, Nathan woke up early, his mind locked on the high-stakes meeting ahead. Investors were expecting a flawless pitch, and he couldn't afford any distractions. He ordered breakfast from room service, sat down with his laptop, and began reviewing the documents he needed. Numbers, projections, market trends, everything had to be perfect. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his focus. Room service. A cheerful voice called out. "Come in," Nathan said, distracted. He kept his eyes on the screen, barely paying attention as the door opened. A waitress stepped in, carefully balancing a tray. She wore a simple uniform, her hair neatly tied back. Nathan finally looked up, and the moment he did, his entire world froze. He knew that face. His heart pounded as realization hit him like a wave. "Madeline?" he whispered, barely believing his own words. The waitress stopped in her tracks. Her brow furrowed as she studied him, confusion flashing in her eyes. "Yes, that's me. Do I know you?" Nathan stood, staring in disbelief. "It's me, Nathan Cole. From college." Her eyes widened. A mix of recognition and shock crossed her face. "Nathan Cole?" she repeated slowly. Then her expression changed, like a long-forgotten memory had suddenly clicked into place. You're the guy with the old leather backpack. The one who always sat in the back row." Nathan let out a small laugh. "That's me." Madeline shook her head, still processing it all. "Wow. You look so different. I can't believe it's really you." Nathan felt a rush of emotions. He'd spent years chasing success, yet in this moment, nothing felt more important than the person standing in front of him. But then, a new thought hit him. Why was she here? Why was the smartest person he had ever known working as a waitress? His joy quickly turned into concern. "Madeline," he said carefully, "what happened? You were the brightest student in our class. I always thought you'd go on to do amazing things." Her smile faded. She looked down at the tray she was holding, gripping it a little tighter. "It's a long story," she said softly. "I've got time," Nathan replied, his voice gentle but firm. Madeline hesitated. Then, slowly, she sat down on the edge of the bed, taking a deep breath. "After college." Things didn't go as planned, she began. My parents went through a messy divorce. It tore my family apart. My mom needed me, so I dropped out of my post-grad program to take care of her. But things kept getting worse. We lost our house. Then she passed away. Nathan's chest tightened. He had imagined so many different paths for Madeline, but never this. I tried to get back on my feet, she continued. But without a degree, no one would hire me. So, I ended up here. Nathan stared at her, his heart aching. She'd saved him once. Now it was his turn. Nathan sat in silence, absorbing everything Madeline had just told him. The girl he once admired, the one who had always seemed unstoppable, had been through more pain than he could imagine. And now, she was here serving breakfast in a hotel, trapped in a life she never planned for. He leaned forward. Madeline, you helped me so much in college. I wouldn't be where I am today without you. Let me return the favor. She gave him a small, tired smile. Nathan, I appreciate that, but life doesn't work like that. There are no shortcuts. I'm not offering you a shortcut, he said firmly. I'm offering you an opportunity. She frowned. What do you mean? Nathan grabbed his laptop, turned it around, and showed her the screen. This is my company, Waitress. We specialize in data solutions, and we need brilliant minds like yours. I have an open position for a lead analyst. It's yours, if you want it. Madeline's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely, Nathan said. You have the talent. Let me give you that chance. Madeline hesitated, her fingers tightening around the tray. Nathan, this is huge. I haven't worked in tech for years. I don't even know if I remember enough to do the job. Nathan shook his head. I know you, Madeline. If there's one thing I remember, it's how fast you learn. You don't just understand things, you master them. I have no doubt you can do this. Her lips parted, but no words came out. It was clear she wanted to believe him, but doubt still lingered in her eyes. Look, Nathan continued, sensing her hesitation. Come in for a trial period. No pressure, no commitments. If you don't like it, you walk away. But at least give yourself the chance to see if this is what you want. Madeline looked down at her uniform, then at the laptop screen. For the first time in years, she saw a path forward, one that didn't involve struggling just to get by. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. Okay, she whispered. I'll try. Nathan grinned. That's all I ask. Madeline's eyes glistened as she wiped them quickly. You really think I can do this? I don't think, Nathan said with certainty. I know. A soft laugh escaped her lips, filled with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She straightened up. Okay then. When do I start? Nathan smiled. How about Monday? Madeline nodded, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally stepping toward the future she was meant for. And as Nathan watched her, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about repaying an old favor. This was about changing a life. Madeline stood outside the sleek glass doors of Waitress, her heart pounding in her chest. The city buzzed around her, but all she could focus on was the massive company logo staring back at her. Could she really do this? Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The lobby was modern and busy, filled with professionals who looked like they belonged. She smoothed down her blazer, a new one Nathan had insisted on buying her, and walked up to the front desk. I'm here for my first day. My name is Madeline Carter. The receptionist smiled. Welcome, Madeline. Nathan told us to expect you. Let me show you to your office. Office? The word felt foreign. She'd been expecting a tiny desk in a crowded room, not something so official. As she followed the receptionist down the hall, her stomach tightened. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? The door opened, revealing a sleek, glass-walled office with a brand-new computer sitting on the desk. Nathan was already inside, grinning. You made it, he said. Madeline let out a breathy laugh. Yeah. Barely, he gestured to the chair. Sit down. Take it in. She sank into the chair, running her hands over the desk. This is unreal. Nathan chuckled. Believe it. You earned it. Before she could reply, there was a knock on the door. A woman in a blazer stepped in. Madeline? I'm Ava, head of the analytics department. Welcome aboard. Madeline quickly stood up, shaking her hand. Thank you. I'm excited to get started. Ava smiled. We're excited to have you. Nathan speaks very highly of you. Your first project is already lined up. I'll walk you through it. Nathan gave Madeline a reassuring nod as Ava led her to the conference room. The next few hours flew by in a blur of data, discussions, and presentations. At first, the numbers felt overwhelming. But then, something clicked. It was like a part of her brain that had been asleep suddenly woke up. By the end of the day, she was analyzing trends, making predictions, and feeling confident. As she packed up to leave, Nathan appeared beside her. How was it? Madeline smiled, a real, genuine smile. It felt amazing. Nathan clapped her on the shoulder. Told you. This is just the beginning. And for the first time in years, Madeline truly believed it. Samantha wiped down the counter, exhausted from another long shift at Harbor Diner. The dinner rush had been brutal, and her feet ached. She glanced at the clock, just 20 more minutes. Then she could go home, put her feet up, and try to forget how empty her bank account was. A deep voice pulled her out of her thoughts. Excuse me, miss. She turned to see a tall man in a crisp suit standing near the register. His kind smile was a rare sight in this place. Yes, sir? Can I get you anything else? He shook his head. Actually, I wanted to thank you. Samantha frowned. Thank me? He nodded. You helped me a few weeks ago. I was down on my luck, and you didn't treat me any differently. You even gave me a free coffee when I couldn't afford one. Samantha's eyes widened. She vaguely remembered him back then. He'd been wearing worn-out clothes, looking tired and defeated. That was you? She asked, surprised. He chuckled. Yeah. Life can turn around fast. She smiled. I'm glad things worked out for you. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. I wanted to return the kindness. I run Harper & Company, we're hiring, and I think you'd be a perfect fit. Samantha stared at the card in disbelief. Wait, you're offering me a job? He nodded. Full-time, with benefits. I saw how hard you work, how you treat people. That's the kind of person I want on my team. Her mind raced. Was this real? Could she actually leave the diner behind and start fresh? I don't know what to say, she stammered. Say yes, he said with a smile. Come in for an interview tomorrow. Samantha looked around the diner, the flickering lights, the endless trays of greasy food, the low pay. Then she looked at the man offering her a chance at something more. She took a deep breath and smiled. I'll be there. His grin widened. Good. I'll see you at 9. As he walked out, Samantha clutched the card, her heart pounding. For the first time in a long time, hope filled her chest. Maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change. Jason walked into his grandfather's dusty old garage, expecting nothing more than some old tools and forgotten junk. But something about the place felt different. As he ran his hand over an old wooden shelf, his fingers brushed against something odd, a tiny metal key wedged in a crack. Curious, he pulled it out. What's this for? He muttered to himself. He glanced around the cluttered space until his eyes landed on a rusty metal box tucked behind a pile of books. His heart pounded as he fit the key into the lock. With a soft click, the lid popped. Open. Inside, he found a stack of faded letters tied with a ribbon, along with a small leather journal. His grandfather's name was written on the cover. Jason's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. What he read made his stomach drop. His grandfather had a secret one that had been buried for over 50 years. The journal told a story of a life Jason never knew about. His grandfather had once been a fugitive, running from a crime he didn't commit. The police had framed him, forcing him to change his identity and disappear. Jason's head spun. Could this really be true? He reached for the letters, carefully unfolding one. It was from his grandfather's long-lost brother, who'd been searching for him for decades. A chill ran down Jason's spine. His grandfather had never mentioned a brother. Had they ever reunited? Or had this secret stayed buried forever? Determined to find answers, Jason took the letters and journal inside. His mother was in the kitchen, washing dishes. "Mom," he said, his voice unsteady, "did Grandpa ever mention having a brother?" His mother froze, her hands gripping the sink. Slowly, she turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Where did you hear that?" she asked cautiously. Jason held up the journal. "I found this in the garage. It says he was hiding from the police, that he changed his name." His mother's face paled. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, she pulled out a chair and sat down. "There's a lot you don't know about your grandfather," she said quietly. "But if you really want to hear the truth, you should sit down." Jason's heart pounded. He knew that whatever she was about to say would change everything, and he was finally ready to hear it. Jason walked into his grandfather's dusty old garage, expecting nothing more than some old tools and forgotten junk. But something about the place felt different. As he ran his hand over an old wooden shelf, his fingers brushed against something odd, a tiny metal key wedged in a crack. Curious, he pulled it out. "What's this for?" he muttered to himself. He glanced around the cluttered space until his eyes landed on a rusty metal box tucked behind a pile of books. His heart pounded as he fit the key into the lock. With a soft click, the lid popped open. Inside, he found a stack of faded letters tied with a ribbon, along with a small leather journal. His grandfather's name was written on the cover. Jason's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. What he read made his stomach drop. His grandfather had a secret one that had been buried for over 50 years. The journal told a story of a life Jason never knew about. His grandfather had once been a fugitive, running from a crime he didn't commit. The police had framed him, forcing him to change his identity and disappear. Jason's head spun. Could this really be true? He reached for the letters, carefully unfolding one. It was from his grandfather's long-lost brother, who'd been searching for him for decades. A chill ran down Jason's spine. His grandfather had never mentioned a brother. Had they ever reunited? Or had this secret stayed buried forever? Determined to find answers, Jason took the letters and journal inside. His mother was in the kitchen, washing dishes. "Mom," he said, his voice unsteady, "did Grandpa ever mention having a brother?" His mother froze, her hands gripping the sink. Slowly, she turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Where did you hear that?" she asked cautiously. Jason held up the journal. "I found this in the garage. It says he was hiding from the police, that he changed his name." His mother's face paled. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, she pulled out a chair and sat down. "There's a lot you don't know about your grandfather," she said quietly. "But if you really want to hear the truth, you should sit down." Jason's heart pounded. He knew that whatever she was about to say would change everything, and he was finally ready to hear it. Daniel never expected his night shift at the gas station to be anything but boring. But when the old man walked in, everything changed. The man looked exhausted, his clothes worn and dirty. He shuffled to the counter, his eyes darting around like he was being watched. "Pump 4, he muttered, sliding a crumpled bill. Across the counter, Daniel nodded and punched the numbers into the register. But as he handed the man his change, something strange happened. The old man grabbed his wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "You need to listen," the man whispered urgently. "Something bad is coming. You have to leave. Now." Daniel blinked in confusion. "What? What are you talking about?" The man glanced over his shoulder, as if checking for someone. His hands trembled. "They know you're here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're watching." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He looked out the window, but the parking lot was empty except for the man's old pickup truck. "Who's watching?" Daniel asked. The man opened his mouth to answer, but then his eyes widened in terror. Without another word, he turned and rushed out the door, his footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding. He stepped out from behind the counter and peered through the glass doors. The man was gone. Daniel frowned. That was weird. Maybe the guy was just paranoid. Or maybe he was in trouble. Shaking his head, Daniel locked the register and decided to check the security cameras. He walked to the back office, sat down, and rewound the footage. What he saw made his blood turn cold. The man hadn't just left. The moment he stepped outside, two shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. They moved unnaturally fast, almost gliding across the pavement. Before Daniel could even react, they were right behind the old man. And then he was gone. 1 second, he was there. The next, the screen glitched, and when it cleared, the old man had disappeared. The figures were nowhere to be seen. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. That wasn't possible. People don't just vanish. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone to call the police. But before he could dial, the screen flickered. Then, a message appeared. You should have listened. Daniel's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the desk. His heart pounded so hard he could barely breathe. The security monitors flickered again. And that's when he saw it. A figure tall and motionless standing just outside the gas station doors. Watching him. Waiting. Daniel's blood ran ice cold. He wasn't alone anymore. Mia had always been told never to go into the basement. Her grandfather's old house was full of strange rules. Don't touch the grandfather clock. Never open the red door in the hallway. And most importantly, stay out of the basement. But that night, when she heard a noise coming from below, curiosity got the best of her. She crept down the old wooden stairs, her heart pounding with every step. The deeper she went, the colder it became. At the bottom, a single light bulb flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. Then she saw it. A massive metal door, bolted shut with heavy locks. She had never seen it before. Another noise. A faint, muffled knock from behind the door. Mia's breath hitched. Someone or something was inside. She hesitated, then slowly reached for the rusted handle. The second her fingers touched the metal bang, the door shook violently, as if something was trying to break out. Mia stumbled back, her pulse racing. And then the knocking stopped. The room fell dead silent. She held her breath, waiting, listening. Then, in a whisper right behind her ear, she heard a voice. You shouldn't be here. Mia spun around, but there was no one there. She bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time, her heart slamming against her ribs. She didn't stop until she was back in her bedroom, the door locked behind her. The next morning, she told her grandfather what happened. His face went pale. You went into the basement? He asked quietly. Mia nodded. What's behind that door? For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, in a low voice, he said, something I prayed you'd never meet. That night, as Mia lay in bed, trying to forget what happened, something made her sit up. A sound, coming from downstairs. A single, faint knock on her bedroom door. Ethan had lived in the same neighborhood his whole life, but there was one place everyone stayed away from: the old train tunnel on the edge of town. People said it was abandoned, forgotten, unsafe. But one evening, as Ethan and his best friend Lucas rode their bikes past it, they noticed something strange. A faint light flickered deep inside the tunnel. No way, Lucas whispered. Nobody goes in there. Ethan hesitated. His parents had warned him about the tunnel. Everyone had. But that light, what if someone's in there? Ethan asked. What if they need help? Lucas shook his head. Then we call someone. We don't go inside. But Ethan's curiosity was too strong. He stepped forward, heart pounding, and peered into the darkness. The air was damp and cold. A chill ran down his spine. Then a noise. A shuffling sound, like footsteps. Lucas grabbed his arm. Dude, let's go. Ethan turned to leave, but the light inside flickered again. Then, suddenly, it moved. Someone or something was carrying it. A shadow shifted deep inside the tunnel. And then, a voice, low, hollow, not human. Help me, please. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The voice sounded so close. Then, without warning, the light went out. The tunnel was pitch black. Then came the footsteps, fast, rushing toward them. Lucas screamed. Ethan grabbed his bike, his hands shaking. They took off, pedaling as fast as they could. Behind them, the footsteps kept coming. But just as they reached the road's silence, the footsteps stopped. Ethan turned back. The tunnel was completely dark. Empty. Nothing was there. Or at least, nothing they could see. The next day, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about it. He searched online, looking for anything about the tunnel's history. And then he found it. An old news article. Local boy goes missing near train tunnel never found. The date? Exactly 25 years ago. Ethan's stomach dropped. The boy's name was William Carter. Underneath the article was a photo. Ethan felt his blood run cold. The boy in the picture, he was holding a lantern. The same light they saw inside the tunnel.